Okay, so just a bit of housekeeping before we start. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the CLIMAR website along with these slides. If you don't want to be part of the recording, please keep your camera off. Please, can you keep your microphone muted unless invited to talk? And there will be time for Q&As and questions at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions as you go along, please add these to the chat and we'll pick them up at the end. Thank you. Okay, so just to quickly run through what we're doing today. First of all, Will is just going to quickly summarise the CLIMAR network. We are sort of assuming that a lot of you are familiar with us already, so we didn't want to overdo that point. I'll then take us through a flexible fund overview, looking at eligibility criteria, financial information, and how we're going to evaluate the process. I'll then look at some timelines, and then I'm going to share with you the expression of interest form, which will form part of the evaluation, so you can see what that looks like in advance. After that, I'll go quickly through some FAQs, and then there's time, hopefully there'll be time to answer any questions. If we don't know the answers to those, then I will make a note of them and we'll get responses back to you. Will, did you want to say a couple of words?
Yeah, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. So this is one of the major sort of milestones, I suppose, in the network. And all of the 8 networks that were funded by UKRI as part of this call have a flexible fund element to them. So keep an eye out for those calls from the other networks as well. So we had a maximum budget which we were allowed to allocate to flexible funds, which is what we have done. We're close to the maximum amount, and I think Emma will tell you more about that in a moment. But I'm sure that most of you are aware of CLIMAR's objectives. So we have been running now since the end of 2023. Is that right? No, 2024. 2024. I'm losing track already. And of course, we're a 4-year network, so we have about 2.5 years left to run. Emma will also give you a little bit of an update on the sort of the activities that we've been working on so far. But obviously, the focus of this network, is really to look at this intersection between climate change and antimicrobial resistance. But it's actually broader than that, of course, because we're taking this planetary health sort of framework perspective. So, and within that, of course, we are including environmental pollution, sort of impacts on terrestrial systems and aquatic systems. We're thinking about biogeochemical cycling, and also we're thinking about microbiology and pathogens and AMR in its broadest sense, of course, that's encapsulated within microbial biodiversity. So we start to actually be thinking more along the lines of the triple planetary crisis of climate change, environmental pollution, and impacts on biodiversity. So it's a sort of a broadening of the One Health perspective, but very much encompasses what we might traditionally think of as One Health. And I think that this network really, out of all of the networks, has the strongest environmental perspective. Of course, the climate change will of course impact human populations, but will impact environmental microbiomes arguably as much as, if not more than, animal and human microbiomes. So that's really all I'm going to say. I mean, we have the working groups running at the moment. We've just started those up. Emma will mention that. There's options for you to still join those working groups if you're not already. We might think that actually some of the key challenges that we really would like the flexible fund applications to focus on might well be aligned with the objectives of the working groups as well. So the working groups are aligned to the planetary boundaries, which are this figure on the left, but also these sort of overarching themes, which are a little bit small in there on the right, but they're what we might think of the more conceptual elements of planetary health, so interconnection with nature, Anthropocene and health, systems thinking, equity and social justice, and on the right, of course, is those planetary boundaries that link through to those subjects that I've already mentioned. So yeah, novel entities, climate change, biodiversity, etc. So okay, Emma, I'll pass. Can we make sure that we're muted, please? We've got some background noise coming through. Okay, Emma.
Thanks very much, Will. Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I've just got before I start the flexible funds, I just want to show everybody a slide just to give you a snapshot of research interests across the network. These slides will be available afterwards, of course, so you don't have to start scribbling stuff down now. But just to give you a brief overview, this is the top 30 research interests of you all. There are many, many more, and we have we've got some basic stats there about what sectors people are based in, which might become relevant if you're looking to sort of collaborate on a flexible fund proposal, and also people's career stages as well. So we do have quite a good mix there. Right, so the flexible funds overview then. Just going to recap whistle-stop tour of the story so far of CLIMAR. Will has already touched on a couple of things. So we were successful in our grant application in April 2024 for the UKRI's transdisciplinary networks to tackle antimicrobial resistance. We were a brand new network starting from scratch. So there was no pre-established network that we were building on. And we kicked off in August 2024. Basically our sort of tenure, our sort of funding time is until 31st of July 2028. So any flexible fund projects funded as part of CLIMAR do need to be well and truly wrapped up by then. In February last year, so this time last year, we subcontracted a social impact consultancy firm called Skating Panda to help us establish when and how the CLIMAR network could make the most impact in this sort of interesting field of climate change and AMR, and the triple planetary crisis. So that we now have a really interesting impact report as a result of that, and that is helping us establish our identity. Now, in December, just gone, many of you will be aware that we established and launched our working groups. These are 10 groups spread across the planetary boundaries and the planetary health pillars. They really are functioning as the sort of the core engine of networking and work, policy-facing work produced as part of the network. They are just going. We're still finding our feet and setting these up, but it's really exciting that we've started that and we've now got some real momentum. Finally, just so you're also aware, we have resubcontracted our colleague Skating Panda to really think about the impact report further and to help us assist with communications, and particularly looking at what priority audiences the CLIMAR network wishes to seek out and convey messaging around or to. So here we go. So that's where we're at. That's where we are in our life cycle at the moment. Now, this money that we've got as part of our UKRI funds, this is the number. We have £184,735, which comes across actually at £147,500 full economic cost. This is ring-fenced within our budget for small grants, which we're hoping to get done and dusted in one round. We're hoping to fund 6 projects, although obviously we don't know what's to come and what ideas people have. Now, split that between 6, you're then looking at a maximum total value of £30,729 for each grant. That's the total value. What that therefore means is that awarded at 80% full economic cost, if that's claimable, that's £24,583 that is sort of invoiceable and claimable, with the remaining 20% contributed by the successful applicants' institutions. Funds, they can be used for both direct and indirect research costs. So this could be staff salary buyout, it could be equipment, could be travel, could be subsistence. Because these funds were awarded as part of the terms and conditions we accepted for our network grant, the use of these funds follows the UKRI's terms and conditions of the FET grants. There's a web page there that I've got a link to. So once you grab hold of these slides, you can always go and look at those terms and conditions if you'd like a closer look. The other important thing to note at this point as well is that funds are awarded by UKRI and they're claimable, therefore, upon completion of the project. Some more eligibility conditions. So other things we need to bear in mind, proposals have got to be led by a researcher based in an institution eligible to receive UKRI funding. There's another web page for you to look at there. The web page link is also on our flexible funds web page. Projects involving overseas incurred costs, including via international collaborators, are not permitted. This was a UKRI grant awarded for sort of the UK. It doesn't mean that international collaboration isn't possible. It just means that there may be other ways of doing it, such as via alternative funding or alternative funding streams, or sort of contributions in kind. All of the projects we're saying need to end by the 31st of December next year and be fully invoiced by the 31st of January. We can't extend beyond that date because at that point the funding for CLIMAR itself will be coming to its end there. So that's our cutoff point. And that's our scope. Moving on to the actual sort of the research criteria, what we're looking for in these proposals. We've got 5 points here that we're going to be sort of weighing up as we come to look at these ideas. So the first thing is your proposal must concern AMR climate change, at least one planetary boundary, or at least one planetary health education framework thread. And that probably won't come as a surprise. Those planetary boundaries and the planetary health education framework are linked in our webpage, and there'll be hyperlinks in this set of slides if you want to take a look at those. We want to sort of promote sort of diversity and inclusion as much as possible. So we're looking for collaborations with at least one early career researcher involved, either as a PI or a co-I. We are following a definition of early career researcher, which I'll come to later on in these slides. As previously sort of mentioned, these proposals need to be led by researchers based in an institution eligible to receive UKRI funding. Proposals also need to be transdisciplinary, working with an external stakeholder. And because we want to make sure that any potential projects are as potentially impactful as possible, they need to feature one published output as an outcome. Now, our definition of what an output is quite broad and inclusive, and I will touch upon them later on. So moving on now, we're looking at how we've decided to evaluate the proposals that come in. So what we've decided to do is we're settling on a 2-stage evaluation process for flexible fund proposals. The first stage is an expression of interest form, which will be a simple 2-page form listing sort of key details about your project and your project team, breakdown of financial information, and then we were asking for you to write sort of maximum 250 words about how your proposal, basically the details of your proposal and how they meet our criteria. We'll then look at those, and from those shortlist some proposal ideas, some expressions of interest, to then make a full application later in the year. And these expressions of interest and applications will be evaluated on key selection criteria, which I will come to in a second. So just to show that visually, we're currently at the pre-application stage of the flexible funds call. So this is where you can ask questions. We're here to provide advice and guidance. And obviously we're doing this webinar now to hopefully make the process really clear. Expression of interest will happen then next, and this is how we're going to do it. We're pre-screening. I'm going to pre-screen the expressions of interest to check that they hit the essential criteria. And then we will have an evaluation pool where the expressions of interest are anonymously reviewed. That evaluation pool then comes together and EOIs are therefore shortlisted. Then we've got that full application stage, a similar setup where we'll have applications reviewed by 2 reviewers, and then the pool of these reviewers will then attend a panel and successful grants will be decided upon. And with both the expression of interest and with the full application process, this is the selection criteria that people will be looking at. So we want proposals that further CLIMAR's vision, proposals that are transdisciplinary, proposals that are well organised with clear aims. Obviously, we're looking as to whether proposals are feasible, whether they're going to be able to be completed on time and yield the promised results. We also need to check that they're cost effective and have value for money and are potentially impactful. That was a lot of information, so I'm just going to summarise this again. So we have funding worth up to a total value per project of £30,729. That's awarded at 80% full economic cost. We do have essential criteria and eligibility rules to adhere to. We have a 2-stage evaluation process. First, the expression of interest, and then later on in the year, there's a full application. And then we have selection criteria that we evaluate the EOIs and the applications on. Okay, timelines then. When is this all going to happen in this year? Here we are now in February 2026 in our pre-application stage. We are going to open our call for expressions of interest on the 2nd of March, the very beginning of March. Then we'll have then a month for expressions of interest to come in, and they will close. That time will close on the 31st of March, the end of that month. We then spend April evaluating those EOIs, sifting them through, and we will then invite shortlisted applications to make full proposals. We're aiming to make all those decisions and notify everybody by the end of April 2026. For those people that are shortlisted, then there's a couple of months for you to spend time on a fuller application. So you'll have May and all of June to work on those, and then with a deadline of the 30th of June. Over the summer, we'll be conducting that fuller sort of evaluation and review, and we're aiming to decide who is going to receive that funding in October 2026. That gives us time to sort out contracting and paperwork. So we're hoping that grants will start at the beginning of 2027. And by 2028 in January, that will be the end of the process and the grants will be finished. Move on. So I'm now going to just quickly show you all what the expression of interest form looks like. It's not available yet. We'll have it ready to download in March, but just to show you what it looks like. It's a pretty straightforward 2-page form. This is the information that we'll be asking for you to complete in section 1. So this is details about your team and who you are. Section 2 features the funding overview. This is where we'd like you to put in how much funding you'd like, and then to cost that funding and give a brief justification of resources there, both at 100% full economic cost and 80% full economic cost. Sections 3 and 4 this is where we're asking you to describe your proposal in 250 words and demonstrate how it meets the above criteria. And then finally, we want sort of assurance that you've run this past your head of department or research finance team, so that they support the submission of it, as obviously it's 20% of this will be potentially paid up by the lead applicant's institution. Right, so that's the expression of interest form covered. I'm going to rattle quickly through some FAQs. These are on our website, but I'll just cover them here just in case they answer some questions today, and then we'll have time to hopefully field any other questions. So we've talked a bit about CLIMAR's vision. What is CLIMAR's vision? CLIMAR's vision is to examine the relationships between AMR, climate change and anthropogenic pollution, facilitated by transdisciplinary approaches and informed by cross-sectoral, cross-network knowledge exchange. That's our whole reason for being here and for the sort of the funding that we've received for our project, or for our network, sorry. We've mentioned the word transdisciplinary a few times. We have a definition here to help you with your proposals. So by transdisciplinary, we mean research that transgresses boundaries between disciplinary knowledge or integrates different bodies of knowledge and actively co-creates knowledge between academic and societal partners such as policymakers or business. We're also talking about impactful research. What do we mean by impactful? We mean an effect on change or benefit to the economy, society, culture, public policy or services, health, the environment, or quality of life beyond academia. That is a UKRI definition that we're following there. We talked about published outputs. I touched upon this earlier. So we're really trying to make this as broad as possible. So we're looking for a product of your research proposal that has undergone a form of peer review or scrutiny, or which reaches a potential audience. So here's some examples. There's obviously the academic publications, online articles, but there's also media interviews, data sets, policy briefs, exhibitions, performances, etc. This has come up a couple of times, so just to stress, under the UKRI's terms and conditions, projects involving overseas incurred costs, including via international collaborators, are not permitted, but international collaborators can provide in-kind contributions, or they can utilise other funding streams. Finally, just to summarise what support and guidance there is available to make this sort of first expression of interest if you do have a funding proposal. So what we've produced is this webinar and the slides, which will be available on our webpage later today. The webpage itself has got information on it, including frequently asked questions. And we also have a designated Flex Funds mailbox. So if you have any queries or questions at anywhere through the process, you can email that email address, which is climarflexfunds@exeter.ac.uk. And that's also the email address where we'd like you to submit your expressions of interest and full applications to. Just also to summarise what we're doing around EDI in this process, because it's quite important. So in order to reduce bias, we are anonymising expressions of interest before being sent to the pool. We're doing as much as we can to involve CLIMAR members with reduced funding opportunities. We're actually looking for early career researchers to be part of the evaluation process. So if perhaps you aren't interested in submitting a proposal but would like to get some experience in seeing what it's like on the other side as working as part of a panel, please do get in touch. Finally, we have got EDI commitments as a network, and these are published on our website. This webinar is open to everyone, and the recording is also available for everybody to look at as well at their convenience. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and it's over to you if you have any other questions. Let's see.
I just wanted to highlight quite a lot of people in the chat have been asking questions about partners outside of the UK receiving funding. I think it is absolutely clear, as I understand it, that no funding can be provided to overseas partners or for overseas activities. And I think we need to make that absolutely clear, because it obviously isn't clear enough to partners at the moment.
Okay. Yes, thanks Jenny for underlining that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got
can I just elaborate on that then? Yeah,
please.
so yeah, this issue of the funding going to overseas institutions is of course not our decision, it's a UKRI criteria. My understanding is that the projects could still have a focus that was non-UK, but that the funds could not be directly used in that third country, but it does mean that technically the overseas members can be involved in the projects and there can be an overseas focus, but all of the funds have to be awarded to and spent in the UK. Did we get clarification, Emma, about even overseas travel and things like that? That's not eligible either.
It's not eligible, no.
So yeah, so this is an unfortunate criteria of the UKRI funding, and yes. So, but we can discuss more offline about mechanisms that could be used to enable participation, but they wouldn't be directly funded.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Okay, so let's have a look at some of these questions. Any other members of the CLIMAR leadership team, do chip in if you know, because I may not have all of the answers in my brain. So I'll just quickly go through the ones in the chat. Liz Mumford, is it anticipated that these will be submitted by individuals or the working groups? It can be submitted by either or both. As long as people are CLIMAR members, there's also, there isn't a limit either to how many proposals you want to sort of submit. Obviously we are looking for people to submit and have a project team with them to enable collaboration and transdisciplinary working. I hope that answers that. Sarah, what do you mean by working with external stakeholders within the project? E.g. as research participants, disseminate results as co-Is. Will or Jenny or Rebecca, do you want to talk about what external stakeholders might mean?
Yeah, I kind of answered that in the chat. My understanding of it, and I'll make it clear to everybody that BBSRC have been unbelievably vague about the parameters of anything. But our understanding of transdisciplinary within the BBSRC space is that they are not academic. So they're not another academic institution. So they could be, like we mentioned, Skating Panda, who are a comms agency helping with dissemination. They could be, for instance, a practitioner group who have a large data set that you may want to analyse. They could be a private sector organisation that gives you access to some of their facilities to run some experiments, but they are not academics. So that's the important thing. So it doesn't mean it's not interdisciplinary between different disciplines. So it's not the case that you have microbiologists and anthropologists working together. It has to be academics with some type of non-academic organisation.
But then I guess it's the level of how involved that non-academic organisation has to be, and I think that can be quite light touch, so they can be like a project partner, or you've consulted with an agency so that your objectives are aligned with some sort of transdisciplinary questions. But so I don't think that the involvement of those partners has to be huge. I don't even think that they would necessarily have to be a co-I, but you need to show some element of translation, and the fact you considered that at the application stage, and that will be built into the proposal. I mean, this is quite common now, really, in UKRI applications. So, and for example, we have a number of project partners on CLIMAR. They aren't funded. They contribute. They contribute in kind in terms of their time, but it's basically just to show that this is not just you sitting in your lab on your own, just doing a question which is sort of limited to your own academic sphere, I suppose. We did have a hand up, didn't we? Was it Katie?
Yes, that was me. Yeah, so sorry, I'm just sort of I'm thinking this question through before that we were talking about in terms of international collaboration. And I was wondering, because I think that sort of isn't what initially understood from the call. And so does that sort of mean, do you think that is there an expectation that this will be conceptually quite UK focused as well? So sort of topic, if the impact of that is that international collaboration is not really facilitated, is there also an expectation that it will be kind of topics that are of specific relevance to the UK? And yeah, I was just curious, and obviously I guess that will also maybe that there's a less of an expectation that it will involve fieldwork, obviously, if that's not funded.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the irony, isn't it? That and the irony of the network is that the network is international facing, and that obviously this question, these problems are international. We're taking a planetary health perspective. I mean, it's unfortunate, obviously, that we're constrained by the funding mechanisms, but I think the answer to that is no. It doesn't have to be UK focused. I mean, what is UK focused in terms of AMR when we've got essentially multiple pandemics of resistant organisms circulating around the world. We know the drivers are global in nature. So I think that the subject matter can be broader. Obviously, it all relates back to the UK, theoretically. But the unfortunate element of this is that we can't fund those overseas elements, but it can have an overseas focus. And as long as there isn't costs incurred in delivering that and or collaborating with overseas partners, that you can have an international focus. That would be what I would say. But we can clarify on the individual criteria if you have any queries in the run-up to expression of interest submission. We can give guidance on that, because we do acknowledge that this is not easy to actually decide where the limitations are. And we've had to go back to UKRI multiple times even to get to the point we are now, but we're happy to go back to UKRI again to query additional queries on questions around this.
I guess it would be interesting to find out more, because obviously it feels like if for projects that want to take an international focus, it's obviously so essential to engage international partners and to have their leadership in many cases. So I feel like it could end up being a real barrier to that sort of
it certainly is a barrier, but it's not a complete barrier, in that you could have an overseas partner, but they would be unfunded. So then they would be making an in-kind contribution, contributing their time. So we know this is not ideal, but it is the reality, unfortunately.
Yeah. Got your hand up.
Paul?
My mic.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because it's showing it's closed. I apologize. I just wanted to give an example of what you could do. Just you could do many things, as long as you don't have to physically go there if you're not going to pay for that yourself. But for example, if you were doing key informant interviews online, it doesn't matter where you are. So there are just to let you know, there are many things that you could do And as long as the collection of data does not require you to be there in person in a place where you're not going to be funded for that transportation unless you're going to fund yourself. So there are things you could do.
Thanks, Paul. Jenny?
I think was it Rebecca?
So I was going
sorry.
to say something. It's fine. I was going to say something similar, so I've put my hand
Okay.
down. Thank you.
Yeah, I was kind of going to add to that as well. I mean, kind of things not under this project that I've been doing and kind of came out of COVID as well is, I've worked quite a lot with partners overseas where they've got a large data set, but they don't really know how to analyze it. That's the kind of thing you can kind of buy time out to help analyze those data sets. And again, they're not funded. You don't have to go there, but you help through that. You could spend, you could do something like kind of a systematic review on a research question that an overseas partner has suggested. And from that, you kind of create the pilot data or the background that allows you to bid for something else. So you could see this as an opportunity to explore, buy some time out to explore a research question with overseas partners and then look at how you might shape that into a larger grant. So there are kind of lots of ways that you can work together with this. But the key thing is unfortunately that there is no funding on the other side of that. But sometimes I think some of those things like kind of a large data set somebody's got, they need some help analysing or kind of planning and talking through what you might do for a larger grant can be quite useful with these, when there's these small amounts of money that buy out some time but don't really allow you to do much else.
Okay. Emma, I think we've just answered Laura in opposite direction. So I mean, I would say that anyone can be a member of the network, so just join the network. So maybe technically not, but if you're being funded and you're involved in a project funded by the network, just join the network. I think is the easiest way to answer that. But maybe technically not. But yeah.
Yeah, does that make sense, Laura?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
So I have answered a few more on the chat just for the purposes of the recording, people listening back. Somebody asked what the ECI criteria was, Sammy. Sorry about this. I thought I put an FAQ on it and obviously I hadn't. So I put in the chat and it's also on the CLIMAR's Flexible Funds webpage, the definition of the UKRI's definition of an early career researcher. So that's both on the chat and on the webpage itself. Kevin asked about the end of project reporting requirements beyond the requirement for a published outcome. This is a good question. So there's going to be an end of award reporting form that we'll ask you to sort of formally fill in at the end of the project. But the aim is for you to meet with us or me regularly to just sort of touch base, and so that we can sort of identify any sort of challenges or opportunities or slips or anything like that as they happen.
Emma?
Yeah.
I was just going to add to that. So there have been some questions around the reporting relating to the payment of the invoicing for funding, and the two are not connected. So once you are selected for funding, you will receive that funding. But the UKRI their criteria are that funding is paid after the end of the project, which I guess is might create some issues for some, and we've had long discussions with them over this. But this is again the criteria. So we can again if your finance or your funding departments have any queries around this, we can answer those and address them, and we can also potentially refer them to UKRI. But so this is an unusual way this has been structured, but actually it's been structured along the line of previous flexible fund elements to previous grants, and so there is evidence that it does work, there is a precedent for all of these criteria that have been put in place. And again, you know, these are not our criteria; these are the funder criteria.
Yeah. Thanks,
Okay.
Will. So, any other questions? There'll always be if you come up against something, there's always the flexible fund mailbox. I'm just going to put that on in the chat now.
Mm. I mean, I think
so please do, yeah. Yeah,
it seems like a lot of information, and it seems like there's a lot of different criteria, but essentially it's actually quite simple. You know, you just need to think of an idea. You know, put together a team. Doesn't have to, you know, it can be just one individual with a partner that's not a non-academic partner, or it could be a few more than that. Obviously, not everyone's going to be able to get any funding out of this. The funding might be more for one individual, or you know, there could be some staff time for an ECR or something that's costed into this. But you will need to talk to your research finance department about what funding model works for you. And of course, the 80%, we have also checked whether there are certain exceptions that could be funded at 100%, and the answer to that is no. So it's standard UKRI funding rules that are being applied.
Jenny.
The same as for the network funding.
I was just going to mention as well to the people who are on this call, it was mentioned there's about 9 or 10 working groups altogether, but most of us on the leadership team kind of sit across 2 or 3 of them. And what's been very apparent in the working groups that I'm sitting across is that some of them have obvious gaps in knowledge that are kind of crying out as a research area, others don't. So if those of you who've got an idea kind of want to email me, and potentially have a chat about that. Again, I'm kind of very loath to share what's come out of the working groups with people who haven't taken the time to join them and contribute. So I would think if you have an idea that you think is aligned to one of our working groups, join that working group, because then you can see the documents that are in progress from that working group, some of which will show where there are research gaps. And some of those research gaps, for instance, in the 3 that I sit across, are some of them are where there's something that a bit of laboratory research could answer quite quickly. So it may be something you do kind of months worth of laboratory work. There's some that are kind of more conceptual understandings of connections between things, and that might lend itself to buying out kind of a month of somebody's time to really get into that. So there are things there that we can help you with, but you know, going back to the question of do you have to be a member of the network and a member of working group, you know, my personal feeling is no, you don't, but wouldn't it be polite if you were? And actually, you know, you're giving something to the network as well as just taking their money. And I'm sorry to kind of be blunt about that, but I think there is that opportunity to really engage with us, and then we can help you back.
Yeah, I just want to come in there, Jenny. I think actually, you know, we're starting to conflate the 2 different things now. I think that this is a separate call. It's not linked to the working groups, but obviously there are discussions ongoing within the working groups around these different subjects that we're interested in. You know, if you're not a member of the working groups, we're still very keen that you consider putting in applications. You could then reach out and link into those working groups if you're not members of them at the moment, but there's no prerequisite for you to do that, and you shouldn't feel discouraged from applying if you're not currently a member of a working group. Okay.
Anything else before we end the meeting? Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much all for coming and listening. And we will put both the slides and the recording of this for people to watch back if they missed it on the website as soon as possible.
Yeah, and do share with colleagues and as well. You know, once you know that once we've got it out onto the website.
There is a link to sign up to the CLIMAR network on the homepage right at the bottom, a great big orange lozenge. So if you do have people you'd like to bring in, just send to the homepage and tell them to sign up there. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.